It's full disclosure, and I'm excited about this one today because we've got Morey Haber, CTO CISO at BeyondTrust, and someone that's just become an expert in the cybersecurity space. Morey, thank you very much for being here today.
Jordan, thank you so much for having me.
I think cybersecurity has always been important, but obviously there have been a number of hacks over the last 10 years, but I think with so much of the workforce going remote, um, for us as a company, and I know for a lot of our clients, cybersecurity was the big concern. So we haven't had anybody with your expertise on, and again, appreciate you joining us.
You're very welcome.
So 30 years in technology, you've climbed the ranks, you've been in leadership for a number of years. How did you get into the cybersecurity space initially?
Well, cybersecurity actually became a little bit of one of those things for me that just happened. When I started my career, I started building flight simulators, military training devices, and there really wasn't a concern for cybersecurity at the time. The first interest I had was we had to put a network sniffer on an old Novell network to figure out why traffic was being dropped between two network zones. And I started realizing that, hey, all this stuff is unencrypted. I can actually reassemble and see people's passwords and email and everything else. And I started getting into it. A couple of careers later, I started doing IT network management, and that led into security. And then in early 2000, about 2004 timeframe, I was up to step into a evangelist type role, development type role for a cybersecurity company. And then that just kept on progressing from product management to business development to CTO and CISO where I am today. So really just started with curiosity and causing trouble by looking at old school wireframe packets.
I mean, talk about a space that's just, 20 years ago even was cybersecurity. I mean, the market potential for the service was not nothing, but probably next to nothing.
It was in some ways very interesting. I start with my earliest career piece with when I say sniffing, because the company I worked for at the time, it doesn't exist anymore. We were trying to update an old DECnet, VAX network to use modern Windows PCs. And at that time, it was Windows NT 351. And we had a lot of traffic pattern problems. And when we figured out that we could actually sniff the traffic and see everything in clear text, management and the IT organization all went pretty nuts. I mean, literally. They were like, you guys, you can't do this anymore. You're going to have to find a better way to protect that someone coming into the building can't see financials and drawings and CAD. And so we actually were an early implementation in the 90s of fiber, bridging technology, routing technology, way before there were even connections to the internet. Nice. To handle some of the security controls. And from there, I think every business from the mid 90s now getting on the internet, starting to use ISPs, whether they were local or not, had to have some security concerns because some of the things that were coming through an email and closer to the year 2000 that could have caused trouble, like worms, really started raising awarenesses to the potential and threats.
Yeah. Wells Fargo was a large client of mine when I got started in this industry, and we did work mainly on the QA side with like their access provisioning team. So I was aware of it from obviously, certain levels are going to have more privileged access than others. But everyone talks about COVID and the impact it's had, but when you talk about just the need for VPNs at a much larger scale I'm an amateur in the space, but has COVID flipped the table over in terms of what companies need to be focusing on from a cybersecurity perspective, or is it more just not as much of a shift as many think?
It's been a huge shift. So well, we were having the previous question about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Everyone is aware of cyber today. Everything from phishing emails at home to, hi, I've got a new auto warranty for you, or I'm the
Yeah.
IRS. There's attack vectors in every direction affecting people from a cyber perspective, right? That's why we recommend complex passwords, don't reuse passwords, things of that nature. And that's pretty fair game that hopefully the audience is aware of.
Yeah.
But since COVID, we now have everybody or a lot of the workforce at home. And that has been a major shift for companies because we've either had to issue devices for people to take home, or they already had devices, or if they couldn't facilitate it, they used their own home computers to gain access.
Yeah.
And in each scenario, there are new and different cyber risks that businesses, state and local governments have had to deal with that basically allow a threat actor to capitalize on this change. People working from home in secure Wi-Fi networks, using corporate software at home, typing sensitive passwords potentially on your own personal computer to do administration of intellectual property or personally identifiable information within the business, all of which has opened up a wide variety of attacks that unfortunately threat actors are using.
And I know that at this point, BeyondTrust has half of the Fortune 100 as clients, which I thought was an incredibly impressive statistic. And I'm sure every case is different, but when you're bringing on these larger scale companies, is it and you can go into as much detail as you're comfortable with, is it a kind of diagnostic process from a high level, or are you going into specific problem area departments to identify the gaps?
It's actually a little bit of both and all of that. For to help with that part of the conversation, I am the CTO and CISO, so I oversee the high-level strategy for what are called privileged access management products, products that work with administrator, root accounts, and eliminate admin rights. But I'm also the CISO, so I oversee the internal security and the cloud security of the solutions we offer. That approach allows me to consume the products we make to prove that they work in a secure fashion and make sure that they do what we've originally designed them to do. So to answer your question with that little bit of background, when I speak to organizations in the Fortune 100 or really anywhere, they're asking it from a two-side approach. They're asking, look, I have this individual problem, I have a regulatory finding, how do I fix it? And then I can present them with a solution architecture, whether it's zero trust based or just in time to get there. The other side of the house is, look, you're a CISO as well. You're seeing the same attacks that I'm seeing. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in, hackers are using similar techniques against all of us. You're using your own tools to solve this problem. How would you use that same tool set in my environment? So I have the advantage of being able to speak to both sides, one as a CISO to my peers, and two as a vendor to help specific use cases. And I'd have to say that most of the clients I speak to go back and forth, or some recognize both, and it's just a benefit to be able to have the conversations in both areas.
I always think of this as a space like it's like until something happens, until there's a breach, you're not that you're not aware, but you're probably not looking out for it at the level that you should be. So, and I know like podcasting on LinkedIn or wherever, try to make things like super easy, like these are the 3 steps to like,
right.
But is there anything just even at a high level that is it just being more careful, or are there things that businesses can look out for to make sure that they're being a little bit more preventative?
There's a whole mess of steps, and that's why it's so when you see vendor marketing going, here's the 3 steps to secure your, you know what? I can buy 1,000 different vendors. I can make it impossible for the end user to get their job done. But in the end of the day, all it takes is a single human mistake to circumvent all of those controls. All it takes is one vulnerability exploit that has not been identified. It's a 0-day or it's an advanced persistent threat, and my day is over anyways.
Yeah.
So it really does start with the first thing that you have to do is training. People need to be aware that certain activities are just bad. Never reuse passwords. Don't use the same passwords home and at work. Secure your passwords. Don't write them down. I mean, this is things that from a cyber standpoint, myself, my peers, and the industry at large say over and over again. And we say it over and over again because people still make the same mistakes. And you know what? I might be, by some people's accounts, an expert in the space. And if you said, hey, Morey, do you really have unique passwords on every single thing you do? I'm going to say, I don't. Okay. And you go, why? You're a hypocrite. It's not. There are certain accounts that it's a username and password, but there is absolutely no risk behind it. There's no credit card there. You can't do anything to me. And it might be like some type of forum where I could read articles. There's literally no risk. So you have to be able to communicate to people the best practices and when certain things are just kind of okay.
Yeah.
After that, the training and the tools. You could put in all sorts of tools. You can use solutions like what I manufacture to remove admin rights, which are very effective for threat mitigation and things of that nature. But in the end of the day, as a good CISO, you know you're potentially or will be at some point be hacked.
Yeah.
Even the best security names based on what's been in the news in the last 2 months have gotten hacked. And that means that you have a proper response plan that is exercised and tested, who to call, what to do, where to contact people, how to disclose that there's a problem. Make sure your contracts are all in place because it can happen to anyone, even the most secure-minded businesses. And that's the best thing I can tell people. Be prepared. You follow the basics, but be prepared.
That's a great point. And it's always a single human point of failure, and companies almost preparing for it and having a plan in place as if it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me into my next question. When I think of, mainstream hacks that have, been more talked about on the news wires, I think of the Yahoo hack in, 8-9 years ago. Obviously, their market cap subsequently went down with their response, and there were probably other reasons for that. And then I think of, and I actually looked this up before we talked, the U.S. Treasury hack last year through the Orion. Has there been, I know this is probably like not a great question, but are there any like hacks in particular that you feel like have changed the way your industry has operated, or is it more the culmination of all of them?
It has. The industry really has changed based on a lot of interesting hacks and problems. For starters, there was a company, we'll just leave the names out to protect the innocent, that recently had an administrative password for their online camera system compromised that allowed the threat actors to see camera feeds from businesses all over the world, including named, household name companies.
Okay.
That really hones in on that you can't have just one username and password that allows someone to see everything and do everything. And it really focuses on that type of privileged attack. Now, if you take that, and that's only a few weeks old, that concept and translate it to people at home and translate it to a lot of technology that you might buy, having the default password, like the name of the router company or the name of a bird or something like that, for every one of those that you put out is just a bad idea. And in fact, California did pass legislation that every device sold has to have a unique password when you power it up for the first time, so that threats like that or people that don't know what they're doing can't be subject to, hey, I just sold you 500 cameras or 300 routers and every password's the same, because people are not technology savvy.
Yeah.
So the effect is a little cumulative in terms of we've seen laws passed, we've seen a recent breach with the camera company that I mentioned, but it all comes down to the lowest hanging fruit that threat actors want to use today, and that is credentials, usernames, passwords that are poorly coded, common, guessable, reused, can fall victim to a spray attack, a brute force attack, or even guessing, become the biggest liability to the security industry today.
Okay. And this is more because we tend to do more software development placement than infrastructure, but we do, a lot of companies moving to the cloud. And I know that's become kind of a thing that everybody wants to be doing in 2021 in one form or another. What does moving from on-prem to cloud networks mean for your industry moving forward?
So moving from on-premise to the cloud means a lot of different things for my industry, actually for any industry, whether it's an ERP solution or a security solution. The first thing is if you're using it as a SaaS application, your traditional perimeter, all of your ACLs and firewall rules and all of the things that you used for that on-premise installation previously don't mean anything.
Yeah.
They just don't. You can control the SaaS application to only come from your business, but that's truly not good enough. So you have to think about how you're going to gate access to that application and protect it. And that's things like single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, behavioral analysis to make sure it's the right person from the right location at the appropriate time doing the right thing. Then you also have the aspect of the administrative accounts, the privileged accounts. Who has admin access? What does it take for them to log in? Is it done with concepts like just in time? And do they have excessive privileges to potentially do damage? We've seen threats like that occur across the board. Now, once you understand that you are now moving things to the cloud and you have a different set of security parameters to work with, you've realized what are my benefits. With the COVID situation, as you first asked, people working from home, you don't need to VPN in to get antivirus updates and patches and things like that. As soon as the device turns on, it can talk to the cloud and get its updates without even authenticating to what was the traditional corporate network. That type of migration or that type of support for people working from home are what excel in cloud environments. So if you take a company that has a traditional sales role, you give a salesman a laptop, and he only has several SaaS applications from Salesforce to maybe his payroll system and a couple of lead gen systems. They're all protected against two-factor authentication, and there's no file storage on-premise or anything else. There's no VPN. Lateral movement for a threat is pretty difficult. There really is none. You'd actually have to laterally move through the SaaS application. Is it impossible? No. It's just much more difficult. So moving things to the cloud and decentralizing it, but putting layers of security protection around it can actually benefit a business quite a bit. And I think that's why you see one of the bigger trends of moving to the cloud is not only cost savings, maintenance, scalability, but also the security benefits.
Yeah. That was excellent. Because I know that like we have some client, I mean, most are not moving everything to the cloud right away, but I don't think we have a customer at this point where it's not on their mind at one form or another. And there's also some hesitancy just because they're afraid of, that aspect. And so it holds them back from making that shift.
They shouldn't be afraid. I mean, last week there was a very large ransomware attack through traditional VPN technology. Someone at home did get infected, VPN into a file storage system on premise to do, standard work, and managed to infect 15,000 computers. VPNs are an old network layer style technology. In the modern cloud world, in my opinion, they're near obsolete. There are plenty of use cases still for it, but it's not necessarily the best way moving forward with all of the practicality and enhancements and security benefits you get with moving to the cloud.
It's good to know. Something that I think we have a lot of younger people in our audience that are in technology. They're in their first development role or more functional role within technology. And I think we talk a lot about, obviously you got to be strong technically and know your industry, but the communication skills that you have and you being able to talk to the business, help lead initiatives. I'm sure that's something that you kind of picked up along the way, but I'm curious, for someone that's at the C level, how important has that aspect been to your overall success? As opposed to there's a lot of people that they get stuck in the technicals and they think that is going to make or break them career-wise. How important has the communication side been to you?
I would say the communication side is the most important, period, because you can always continue to learn technically and communicate what you do know and what you don't know technically, as long as you have the mindset to continue to learn. In my opinion, anybody that is fresh out of school, starting a technology degree, whether they're a developer or security professional going into governance, actually any type of, IT technology type thing. If you can learn how to communicate, that is going to be your best asset moving forward. And communication doesn't only mean having conversation. It means listening, not speaking for the sake of speaking, being humble, knowing that you don't know anything, but also being able to write, being able to do things like PowerPoint, public speaking, appropriately use social media outside of the 140 characters on Twitter. You have to be able to take your ideas and express them to others,
Yeah.
but realize you don't know everything. And that feedback from all different perspectives is important. And then be open to adjust your opinion when appropriate. Because I might make the notion, like I just said, VPNs are obsolete, dead technology. There's better systems out there. But someone can come along and go, you'll never replace it for X, Y, and Z. I recognize that. But they may also say X, Y, and Z and ABC. And I didn't know about ABC. You have to be open to adjust your opinions and be cognizant that you're not always right. But the best way to do that is open communication and listening, not talking for the sake of talking.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful. And I think what I want to just close with is if you're not following Morey on LinkedIn, you need to be, because obviously the expertise that he has, but this is somebody that's in it, that's working with customers on a day-to-day basis, large scale companies. And I think just the sheer amount of situations that you're involved in takes kind of your expertise out of just the research and the trends, and actually, you're living it every day. So really appreciate you coming on and your perspective.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for the compliments. But I would never be successful to this point without good mentors that I've had along my journey that have entrusted me to make decisions, to provide feedback, let me fall on my face when appropriately, and then support me to get back up. So never think of this type of journey alone. Find people that you can rely on, trust on. That'll always help you be successful.